You are listening to That Hoarder Overcome Compulsive Hoarding. I'm a hoarder who needed an outlet to talk about this unusual and isolating mental illness. And because my hoarding is secret, I started this podcast to talk about it. Subscribe to the podcast and find my social media links, episode transcripts, and every link that I mention at overcomecompulsivehoarding.co.uk. Finally, I am not a doctor. I'm just a hoarder doing her best. So do seek professional support if and when you need it. Hey, how are you? I am well, thank you for asking. I have had some really nice days this week, which I have very much appreciated. Today, I am talking about the myth that a lot of us believe that by keeping everything and maybe acquiring more, we can be prepared for every eventuality. It can feel very comforting to think, I've got supplies, or I won't run out of, or if I need them, I will have these things, or I am ready for whatever life throws at me because I am surrounded by stuff. The difficulty with that is that life is impossible to predict. We know that. But the many ways in which it can be unexpected are countless. You can think you've planned for every eventuality, and then something comes out of left field that makes no sense at all, and then you have to deal with it. We can plan and plan and plan. We can think we're prepared, and the universe can throw something completely nonsensical at us. We all have experience of this. And for every item we keep, we might see infinite possibilities for it. We might see infinite scenarios it could be useful for. There are also infinite scenarios in which it will be entirely irrelevant. And if we keep every item for every possible future need, we'd also need infinite space, infinite money, and a way to locate and find it all and keep it safe. And we know this logically, but anxiety and all of that panic around hoarding and acquiring and discarding can make us go, oh yeah, but this thing, I better keep this one. I know that in the bigger picture I shouldn't, but this specific thing, that will be what makes me secure. That will be what makes everything okay. The way that life can throw unexpected scenarios at us is quite impressive. And we can plan, if you're planning like an event or planning a day out, you think you've thought through everything. We've planned 100 different scenarios, and then scenario 101 arrives. We can't know the future. We can do our best to prepare sensibly, but new situations, new problems, new needs, new necessities will always risk popping up that we couldn't have predicted. So while there is sensible preparation we can do, like always having a first aid kit in the house that we know where it is, we can't win the game of prepared for everything by keeping stuff in our homes. A first aid kit in our home that is accessible makes sense. Treatments for every kind of sports injury when you don't even play sports doesn't make sense. One problem is specificity, which is a very nice word to say out loud. A lot of items have a specific use, whereas life is very varied. We might keep a particular thing, say a tool that might be needed for a specific kind of repair, but then something breaks that tool has nothing to do with. So we then get all the tools for all the potential repairs, and it's unwieldy and unreasonable, and we don't know where they are by the time we do need a repair. the mismatch between what we save and what we need is real. And that doesn't mean we should save more. This is the key. There will always be times where we could do with a particular thing that we don't have or can't put our hands on. That doesn't mean that the solution is to add that thing to the home for in 10 years' time when you next need to do that thing. What it means is that the reality of life is that we can't be prepared for everything. And what we think of as being prepared for everything is often actually a way of soothing that anxiety, that discomfort, those hard feelings that we're trying to ignore, maybe anxiety about the future, maybe something else entirely. We tell ourselves that we're keeping things to be prepared and to be ready, but often it is about something else entirely. And context matters. If you run marathons and you regularly need ice packs, it makes sense to have a supply of ice packs. If you haven't used an ice pack in the last 3 years, you maybe want to keep one in case you get toothache, but you don't need 8. The context is important. The first aid kit is good for when you accidentally cut your finger when you're chopping potatoes. You don't need surgical equipment and specialised medical stuff unless you are somehow an emergency nurse from home. Extra blankets are helpful in some situations. They are unwieldy in others. A bag of crafty things might be nice if you're a crafty person, but only if you've got the time and you're actually doing the crafty things. And even then, if you have so much that you can't find what you need, or you have so much but none of it seems to apply to what you want to make anyway, it's not actually helping. Most scenarios need us to have stuff for the right context. They need us to have the capability to use it and also the right circumstances. And it's tempting to hear that and think, right, I need more stuff. But the opposite is true, because the truth is that we have stuff for all these eventualities without that context, capability, and circumstance coming into play. In a real emergency, or in a situation where you really need to put your hands on something, the trick isn't to have 3 of every conceivable item in your home. That's not what you need in those circumstances. But what we do need in those circumstances is resourcefulness. We've all heard of, was it a football player or a rugby player? She got a bad nosebleed and put a tampon up her nose to stem the bleeding. I can't imagine that was necessarily the plan, but somebody was resourceful and said, you know what's absorbent? And so she put a tampon up her nose and carried on playing. That's resourcefulness. We've all seen medical shows where somebody couldn't breathe in an emergency situation, and so a paramedic did a tracheotomy using a ballpoint pen. We've all heard of mountain climbers who broke their leg miles from anywhere and were at risk of freezing to death and used the most unlikely things to save their own lives. When we face unexpected situations, it's not having hoarded the right items that tends to save us. It's accessing our problem-solving skills. So, okay, I don't necessarily have this, but I do have that. Or if I use that in that way, that could work, which is full of creativity as well. And as Dr. Jan Eppingstall and I talked about in a recent episode about resourcefulness, A lot of people who hoard are very creative and resourceful when it comes to justifying why we should keep something. We can think of a lot of uses for it when we want to keep it. But for some reason, in a situation where we need something, we forget all those other things that we promised we could use in that situation, and we suddenly need to acquire the precise item we were thinking of. Another skill that is important for that creativity and resourcefulness is having some adaptability, allowing ourselves to improvise and try things out and test things and adapt, do things maybe slightly differently to what might be expected, but in a way that still does the job. Resourcefulness can include accessing help from other people. This is something I find incredibly hard, but when I allow myself to ask for help, people will often help willingly, keenly, more keen than I am. And it can be invaluable. Something else that helps with that resourcefulness is if we can think clearly and without distraction because we are not overwhelmed by stuff. It's easier to deal with an emergency situation or an urgent need if we're not also trying to hold up a pile of magazines that's threatening to collapse over the room. And also having not just that mental space from not being overwhelmed, but also the physical space to deal with an unexpected situation is usually far more valuable than knowing that 3 boxes from the bottom on the left, we do have wrapping paper in the precise colour we would like to wrap this gift in. And this brings me to one of the biggest ironies, really, of over-preparedness that takes the form of hoarding stuff. The irony is that hoarding all of those just-in-case items often makes us less prepared for real emergencies, for real unexpected situations. We can't find what we need amidst the clutter, or we can find it but it's broken or ruined. We can't evacuate quickly if we need to, or help can't get in to help us if we need it. There might be fire hazards, exits might be blocked. We might be more isolated from other people in general, which limits our support network. And if we're overwhelmed by the stuff in our homes, we might have less capacity to deal with a situation with the clear thinking and resourcefulness we need. Because if you break your arm, you might suddenly wish you did have more than one ice pack. But what you can do in that situation is use your ice pack, and also, until you can get hold of more, freeze some bottles of water, and as your ice pack is back in the freezer, use the frozen water bottles on your broken arm. And then when they have thawed, you get the ice pack back out. It may not be ideal, but it does the job. In a way that having a freezer full of ice packs just in case, to the degree that you can't put food in there, that doesn't do anybody any favours. It's important to look at the emotions around all of this and remember that often it's not about the urgent, unexpected scenario we might be imagining, or we might think or say it's about. When we talk about being prepared for every eventuality, often we are not talking about specific physical real life situations. If we dig a bit deeper, what we're doing is trying to manage an unpleasant feeling, something about the future is uncertain and that makes me anxious. Or if I am unprepared, that makes me inadequate or irresponsible. Or there was a time I didn't have what I needed and it scared me to death and I never want that to happen again. Or everything is chaotic and terrifying, and if I can just have the right things, then I can manage that chaos. And all of those scenarios, uncertainty about the future, feeling inadequate, fear over reliving past experiences, wanting to feel in control, they are deep-seated emotional things that are not fixed by buying the entire Aldi middle aisle. And we know that. We do know that. A conversation that comes up sometimes in the de-hoarding accountability Zoom sessions is, if we had more space, would we be okay? People will sometimes say something like, if I just had one extra room, I feel like I could get my stuff organised. And generally we talk around it and then conclude that no, if we had more space, we would fill up more space. Because we know that we buy this thing or we bring home this thing because it soothes some anxiety or some unpleasant feeling. But we know that it's never enough. There's always another thing that we feel we have to keep hold of or acquire to soothe the next anxiety. But then there's always another thing and another thing. And so much as we refuse to let go of things and much as we might bring new things in, it's not soothing the anxiety. There's no amount of stuff where we would go, okay, that's fine now. All is good now. Because it's not a stuff issue. It becomes a stuff issue, but the reasoning is not about the stuff. The stuff represents almost neutralizing a particular fear or difficult feeling. When objects can't resolve our emotional needs, it's not about the boxes or the jars or the magazines or the clothes. It's about a sense of security. It's about a sense of identity. It's about reassuring ourselves. And we hope that those things will provide that. But that feeling never quite comes, no matter how many of those things we keep or acquire. And so, because for whatever reason that pathway was built in our brain, we then think the solution is to keep or acquire more. Did you know that I run de-hoarding accountability Zoom sessions twice a month? We get together, cameras off if you prefer, each with a de-hoarding goal, and we get on with our own tasks while chatting. They're really friendly and it's so refreshing to be able to talk with others who face the same problem. Grab a ticket for the next one at overcomecompulsivehoarding.co.uk/ticket. Now, there are times when an emergency situation or an unexpected situation occurs and something we hoarded does actually save the day. This sometimes happens. And in those moments, my goodness, we feel vindicated. I know somebody with a phobia of lifts, elevators, lifts. And he had to go in one once and it broke down. And he hated it, but he was also secretly quite chuffed because it proved him right. It proved that he was right to be afraid of lifts. And occasionally we get a new device and a cable that has been in the back of a drawer for 12 years finally comes in handy. Or a shelf falls down and the one weird shaped nail is the only thing that can fix it. And we can go, there we are. I was right. I was right to keep everything. The button came off my coat, and it was only because I kept the spare button from that coat that I could attach a button that matched. And we go, see, I was right. And this happens to me. I'm sure it's happened to you. And it's kind of a dangerous moment. But really, there is a cost-benefit analysis that it's worth looking at. The cable that works on our new device took up space for 12 years. The button was annoying on a particular spot. You kept knocking it off, and it's been an annoyance for 5 years. That when we could have fixed the coat with a different button and not one person would have noticed. Or we could have given the coat a whole new look by replacing all the buttons at once. The item came with a cable. We didn't need the one at the back of the drawer anyway, even if it does fit and feel vindicating. But also the feeling of winning by something we hoarded actually coming in useful doesn't account for the space it took up, the annoyance it caused us, the mental energy it's taken to track and manage that item over years, the emotional burden of living in a home that is too full of things like buttons and cables, but also the opportunity cost of what that space could have been used for, what we could have been doing with our emotional and physical energy without keeping it. And also, crucially, the 487,000 other items that never come in useful. We count and mark every time we were proven right because something came in useful. We quietly ignore the 400 times a day we pass by items that have never been and never will be useful. So what if we hadn't had that cable? What if we had lost the spare button for a coat? If we didn't have something else that could do the job, we could borrow. We could buy a replacement button for pennies. We could wait a few extra days to use something to buy one. We could have decided we weren't actually that bothered about the coat and worn one of our 12 other ones. We could have sat with the discomfort and learnt to tolerate some of it. We could have waited. We could have found something else that would do the job, or a different way to do the job. Because there is a difference as well between convenience and necessity. Having the item and knowing where it was and it still being in good condition was convenient, great. But often it's not necessary for our survival or for our well-being. The existence of those items filling up our homes uncomfortably is detrimental to our survival and well-being. And that's if we can find it and it's usable. But even when we do find it and it is usable, just because it's convenient doesn't mean it was life-saving. We could have probably been resourceful had we not found it, whatever it is. It is reasonable to be prepared with an up-to-date first aid kit. It is not reasonable to have 87 half-full bottles of shampoo because one day we might run out. That's managing some other anxiety. It's not managing a hair washing situation. And even if we ran out of shampoo, nothing terrible would happen if we waited till tomorrow to go and buy some. We cope all the time with all kinds of situations. You go outside and it starts raining and you don't have an umbrella and it's annoying and you get wet and it's annoying and chilly, but you're fine. You need a screwdriver and you can't find one, so you use a 2p coin to open something. It's fine. You want to put shelves up, you can't find your drill. You know your sister's got a drill, you borrow hers. You run out of milk and you have a vaguely dissatisfying cup of black tea instead of your usual milky tea. They're not disasters. They might be minor annoyances. They might also give you a boost and remind you that you are creative and resourceful and can get through situations that are not ideal. We are already adapting and improvising and being resourceful and coping. We do it to a degree that we barely notice a lot of the time. As we walk down the street, we're avoiding obstacles without being that conscious about it. We're adapting to our surroundings. We fasten our coat when it gets colder because we're adapting to changing surroundings. We often have to make do, and we do. So, of course, there are times when a hoarded item saves us, in inverted commas. But there are many, many times one doesn't, and we survive it, and we're reminded that we cope. It's important when we do have those moments that feel like vindication. It's important we don't let it reinforce our behaviours that we're trying to get under control. You know, if you go to an amusement arcade and you play the slot machines, and once in a while you see somebody win lots and lots of money, and that's enough to keep the next person putting all of their coins in the slot machine. But the slot machine's gain is the customer's loss. We can't let the moments that feel like vindication be the occasional slot machine payout that keeps us trapped and losing. It feels like it's evidence that supports hoarding behaviour, but it's often at best coincidence. It's pure luck that we happen to not only have that thing, but know where it is and be able to access it and it be in workable condition. But that sense that it's not a coincidence, it's proof that hoarding is correct, keeps us trapped in this cycle that we think is solving our problems, but is actually creating more problems. In reality, it is terrifying and liberating to embrace, at least some of the time, being good enough. We can prepare for reasonable, likely scenarios. We want to have our working pen, for instance. We want to have some food in the cupboards or in the fridge. We want to have a working smoke detector or carbon monoxide detector. But we can't think of every item we own or want to own as having the same essential justification as having some antiseptic cream and plasters in a tin outside the bathroom. We need to have some trust that future us can deal with unexpected situations and will deal with unexpected situations, even if we don't have the right items to hand. We are creative and resourceful. We adapt all the time, and we need some trust in the capability of us in the future. It can be quite freeing, and this sounds contradictory, but it can be quite freeing to accept that there is no way to prepare for everything, and that instead, what can we do to live in a nourishing way in this moment now? What can we do to make choices based on what we need now, based on what we value now? It can be freeing to trust our resilience and our capability and the resources around us, be that neighbours with a lawnmower or friends who will come and shovel snow for you. It can be freeing to remember that we can connect with others. And it can be absolutely freeing to use our space in a way that works for us now, rather than suffocating our space just in case at some point in the future we might be a size 12 again. If having lots of stuff made us feel secure, we would feel secure by now. If having lots of stuff meant we were prepared for every eventuality, then we would feel like we were. The fact that we keep adding more or keep hold of even the broken, dirty, unusable things suggests that the stuff isn't actually solving the problem we hope it will solve. And the sense of security we are looking for maybe doesn't come from owning 3 of everything. It comes from accepting, trusting, believing that we have capacity and capability and resourcefulness and creativity to handle what comes next and the uncertainty of that. I would love to know what you think. Do get in touch. Okay. Thank you for listening, and I will speak to you next time. Thank you for listening to That Hoarder Overcome Compulsive Hoarding podcast. It's been a pleasure to have you on board. You can find all the links I've mentioned and a transcript of the episode online at overcomecompulsivehoarding.co.uk. To find out more about how you can support this podcast and the overall project, go to overcomecompulsivehoarding.co.uk/support and do subscribe to the podcast so you make sure you don't miss any future episodes. There may be links in this podcast that earn me money. This doesn't come at any extra cost to you if you make a purchase through those links, and it helps to support the podcast.